Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us here for your voice in a community discussion, community conversation. We're here every Wednesday night. We've been doing a number of broad discussion points relevant to the time, to our, the times that we're living in right now, whether it's the COVID-19 and the impact that it's having on our small businesses or impacted communities. But over the last few weeks, we've been highlighting the issues that are directly related to some of the race relations, the police issues that we're dealing with right now, both nationally and locally. And tonight we're very fortunate to have a panel of people who are very expertise in their area on this topic that we're all going to be listening to, and we're going to learn a great deal about the issues that the police are going through right now, and also the issues that in particular, the Black community is going on right now. So I wanted to bring the panel on so that we can get right to it. If we can bring everybody on, Ben, that would be great. And then I'm just going to introduce them and then ask them to kind of give us a little bit of overview. Many of them are going to be very familiar faces with the people who are watching this and the several thousand of people that will end up watching this through a recording. But first, I'd like to just introduce Jim Vincent, who is the president of the NAACP Providence branch. Jim, thank you for being here. Just give a little overview of all the work we do. We do share a high school graduation and a college graduation year together, so we can't get away from that. Thanks, Jim.
We do, a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for bringing me on. As you said, I'm the president of the NAACP Providence branch. I've been a member of that branch for 17 years. I'm in the 10th year as president, and we deal with civil rights. We deal with that every day. We deal with bigotry and racism complaints on a daily basis. We try to navigate the system to try to help complainants. But we also deal with legislation that we feel is going to advance the interests of people of color primarily.
Yes.
So we're busy. We're at it. We're in the discussion in terms of police brutality. We're in the discussion in terms of the pandemic. We're in all the discussions, and we're proud and we're honored to be a part of it. So I'm here to be of any access to anybody that has any questions. Certainly, I'm here to learn as well. I don't have all the answers, so I just thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, well, Jim, thank you, and thank you for your leadership. Clearly, like I said, you don't need an introduction, and you've been a strong advocate, and getting a lot of success stories. In addition to the challenges you have, but you've been very effective as a leader, and I think you're at the right moment. We have the right person at the right time leading the NAACP here in Providence, because we're certainly at a moment where we could even see a significant more positive change. So thank you for being here, Jim.
Thank you.
Lorie Fridell, who is a professor of criminology at the University of South Florida and founder of Fair and Impartial Policing Training Program. Please introduce yourself, and thank you so much for being here. You have a little bit of experience in Rhode Island. My chief of staff, Tony Silva, was my chief of police when I was a mayor. And so when we started talking about this issue and how I wanted to be starting to do, follow-ups on the Black Lives Matter show we've had, and also the young people that ran, were involved with leading the protest here a few Fridays ago with 10,000 people, and we keep that, moving forward. He said, we got to get the doctor on. So thank you so much for being here. Give a little bit of your background, and before we get into the meat of the conversation. Thank you, Doctor.
Good. And thank you for having me, Lieutenant Governor. It's great to be here. So yeah, professor of criminology, University of South Florida, and founder of Fair and Impartial Policing, which is the #1 implicit bias awareness training program for law enforcement in North America. Rhode Island, as you said, was one of my earliest clients. I'm also, Lieutenant Governor, an academic expert on use of force, and both of those issues, bias policing and use of force, are in the news. I've authored or edited 3 books on that topic and 14 articles and chapters on the use of force.
Yeah, well, Lorie, thank you for being here and joining this panel of chief of police and joining Jim as well to be talking about the things that really matter right now in our community. And we got to provide the leadership and with the correct training and the correct correct, network of professionals. Like I said to Jim, I think that we're at this moment where some extraordinary things can happen out of some very dire circumstances that brought us to this point. Brian Sullivan, please introduce yourself, Chief of Police in the town of Lincoln, also the current president of the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association.
Thanks, Lieutenant Governor. Thanks for having me. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm the Chief of Police in the town of Lincoln and the current president of the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association. I've been in law enforcement for 32 years, all of it with the Lincoln Police Department, rising up through the ranks of dispatcher, patrolman, sergeant, lieutenant, deputy chief, and now chief. And I did attend Lorie's, Dr. Fridell's class when she was here in Rhode Island.
Yeah. Well, being in a bordering town, I don't come from a town of Cumberland, which borders Lincoln right along the Blackstone River, the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. We're very proud of that as a state. And so Chief, thank you for being here, and thank you for your leadership in the town of Lincoln for many years. Heck, you actually served, I think, at the same time that Chief Silva was on the force in the town of Lincoln, right?
I was there for a while with Tony, yes.
Yes, that's right.
He's
Sid
much
Wordell,
older than me.
Chief Wordell, to me, executive director of the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association, but and a go-to person for me in many ways. So Sid, thank you for being here tonight. Please just kind of introduce yourself, set the table for our discussion that we're going to have over the next 45, 50 minutes.
Sure. I also want to say thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for setting this up, and it's an honor to be able to sit here with folks that are out in the communities and trying to do the right thing for everyone. I've also attended one of Dr. Fridell's training, so fortunate enough to be able to do that. So I've 27 years in law enforcement, all in the community of Little Compton. The last 10 years of that, I served as the chief of police, and I retired just about 6 years ago now. And I think I'm in my 5th year now as the executive director for the Rhode Island Police Chiefs Association. And it's an honor to be here. Yeah,
well, again, just for the people who are watching and also the panel members, you've been a go-to person for me when I was a mayor with Tony as Silver, as well as lieutenant governor on many issues, as I went to Jim Vincent for advice on legislation that he was really champion in engineering, and got many of those pieces of legislation passed that are right in the same vein that we're talking about tonight. But in terms of gun issues and those type of things, Sid, you've been a really good person and a valuable resource for me and the state of Rhode Island. So thank you for being here tonight. I just want to and Tony's going to join us as soon as he figures out how to get on. We'll have to give him a little lesson in that, Lorie. You gave him good lessons on the issues that you're expert at. But, we haven't got Tony on yet, but I think he's coming on. He's going to join us about 7:30, and we're going to discuss it. But I just want to kind of set up. I mean, I talked briefly about the protest that I was involved in. I participated in a way that I thought it was very peaceful, and it was well done. And I had young people, young kids that in my world, recent college graduates that were helping organize that event. I met with them more than once. I met them at the State House, but that was all prompted, right, by George Floyd, right? The issue that happened in Minneapolis, right, where a former police officer, killed a black man, 46 years old, and so a lot of this issues are coming as a result of that. Although, as Jim knows and everybody on this call knows, the issues that we're talking about have existed for far too long, right? For a couple hundred years, right? In one shape or form. And now we have, Rashad Brooks just recently in the same position, and an ex-police officer has just been charged with a felony murder charge. And this is real. And so this is why I've asked this panel to come together tonight, is to let's talk about the things that might need to be really addressed in an aggressive way. And And I think it filters on into many other areas that are not just into policing, but right now that seems to be the front and center, but has a lot to do with education, has a lot, and Jim's going to talk about many of the things that he's been advocating for in terms of just simple expulsion rates or just simple discipline strategies right inside our schools, so that are clearly, different for kids of color, and actually the Black community. So I found an article, and just to kind of just open it up before and I'll let everybody kind of fill in, start filling in the details. But I found one article that I thought was interesting, written very early in June as a result of it, and they talked about 8 things that need to be done by the police to start to create some corrective measures that could gain the confidence where they may have lost it with the general public. I believe that in Rhode Island, we haven't lost that. We've got some really good leadership there, but we also have a great deal to learn. But I think the 8 things were like the police need to apologize, for centuries of abuse. And we know that it can be documented, and we're seeing it right in front of us. Right now, police should be trained to address their racial biases. Police should avoid situations that lead them to use force. I think that what happened in Atlanta this past weekend is a clear example of that. I mean, that escalated in a way that I'd like to hear the chiefs talk about how to avoid that type of thing and what's being done. Officers must be held accountable in a very transparent way. On-the-job incentives for police officers need to change in terms of in terms of quotas and that type of thing that kind of lead police to head in the wrong direction in many cases. On-job incentives for police officers, and we need higher standards and better pay in some cases to get the professionals in that we need. And police need to focus on the few people in the communities causing chaos and violence. And we need a better data. And that was one of the things that young man Dimitri talked to me about, that helped organize that peaceful demonstration with 10,000 people right at this back side of the State House. I mean, it was a very impressive demonstration. And the point was made that we need to not just listen, but we need to hear. We actually have to listen, but make sure that we hear what's being said, right? Not just kind of passively listening. So what I wanted to do was, those are just some of the ideas that are out there. I know that you're working on far more, but I just wanted to kind of set it up. And I also know that there's discussions that we're going to continue to have outside of the policing experts, as well as inside the policing experts, because I do believe in all the things that I've seen that go well, that there's this connection that's made by all the different parties, right? So what I wanted to do is first, call on Jim, Vincent, kind of give a perspective on where we are today from the perspective of your position as president of the NAACP Providence Division. You could do that.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you again, Lieutenant Governor, for having me on. And what's happening in the world now, because this is a worldwide phenomenon, is that we're having a very honest and frank discussion about racism in the world. People of color have experienced racism from the beginning, and it's on a daily basis. The microaggressions are daily, but people wear masks to kind of conceal their anger at what they are going through because they feel they have to take it. Well, at some point, everybody says enough is enough. And I think this is that moment. I sense that this is different. I think for too many in America, they felt that there was no racism and that maybe people were complaining. And then they saw George Floyd, a person murdered in cold blood in front of the world. And for them, for many, it was an epiphany. They said, wow, man, there is racism. There is police brutality. This is unbelievable. They could not believe what they were saying. And for that officer, he was comfortable, he was calm, he was smug, he looked in the camera because he knew, because it was a black guy, I guess he felt nothing was going to happen to him.
Yeah.
He knew that the person wasn't white, so he knew that for him, this was okay. It's just another black guy gone. He's probably thinking he's doing a good thing. And the world was horrified. The world was horrified. So, it's good that he's been charged with second-degree murder. I know early in Atlanta, the attorney general or the district attorney charged the officer with felony murder. That officer's facing the death penalty. Georgia's a death penalty state, so felony murder is serious. That officer could get the death penalty. Think about that. A police officer who was sworn to protect and serve us could go so far wrong, in my estimation, that he's now facing a death penalty, perhaps, if convicted. We are living in some interesting times. I think we need to accept what's going on. The whole idea of defending that, well, it's just a couple of bad apples. No, it's systemic and it's cultural. And in couple examples. One was happening in Providence with a black firefighter. Commissioner Parry said it wasn't racial profiling. Well, I don't contest that. Given the call, red car, gun in the car, whatever. Police officers are going up to a red car and they have the guns up because they don't know who's in that car, and that person likely has a gun. So I understand that. I don't think they really saw that there was a black person in the car. I think they saw the red car and they thought it could be a threat. So they had the guns. And then when they saw that the person was who he said he was, and I know that they believed him because they reholstered the weapon. They wouldn't have reholstered the weapon if they didn't believe him. They said, okay, our bad. We have to follow up on calls, and he understood. He was traumatized by the gun, of course. But the thing that went south for me is that there were two officers, one black, one white. The black officer, and I think the white officer both apologized. I know the black officer did, and left. And then the white officer searched the car, which is legal. However, I've talked to a number of people, and they told me if that was a white firefighter, there's no way that white officer would have searched that car. It just isn't done. That was implicit bias by that officer. Okay, and I don't know if there's any amount of training that's going to help him. He probably is in the wrong line of work, I think. And I say that because he turned his video cam off, or he never had it on. That, to me, he should be fired for that. But I know you can't be fired even for felony murder in Rhode Island. If George Floyd happened here and the officer did exactly everything on tape, whatever, the biggest suspension, the biggest punishment he could have got is either a 2-day paid suspension or a 2-day unpaid suspension. I know it's 2 days. I don't know if it's paid or unpaid. Could he be fired? Absolutely not. And that is horrendous. When I heard that, I dropped my phone. I was in horror. I said, that can't be on the books. They said, Jim, you got to look that up. They said that officer would be more protected in Rhode Island than any state in the country, 50 states. And I said, I can't believe it. I never knew. They said, oh yeah, we got a problem here, and we're gonna fix it.
Yeah, and I think that's the intent here to talk about it, Jim. And thank you so much for giving a real perspective on what's happening, right? And you've been sitting in that seat for many years, and some people listen, but I don't think everybody heard. Right. I don't think everybody heard you, and I think they are hearing you now. And I hope that our voice here projects in a way that people hear what you're saying. And so thank you for being here tonight. We're going to circle back with you after we kind of get a perspective here a little bit from the doctor. Lorie, give us a little overview of how you fit into this current situation, with your Impartial policing program, Lorie, and what role you're playing right now nationally, and what you could, what you can offer here tonight to kind of give us some direction as well from the perspective and your vast experience in this issue.
Good. Well, Lieutenant Governor, implicit bias awareness training absolutely has a place in reform, not just in policing. All humans, whatever profession or no profession, all of us have implicit biases that impact on our perceptions and our behaviors. So our trainings bring this science of bias to the police profession. So it does have a place, but it's important that we recognize where it fits in the larger package of best practices and reform. Jim mentioned this. We're not going to impact everybody in our room. Our training is going to be most valuable for the people in the room at the line level who want to serve their communities, who want to be better police officers. It's because we're not going to impact everybody in the officer level training room. Because of that, the training of line personnel is only one bullet on a long list of what agency leaders need to be doing to promote fair and impartial policing. For instance, they have to be thinking not just about their well-intentioned officers, of which I think the vast majority are, but also the ill-intentioned officers or those who have become so cynical, so negative that they no longer have the guardian orientation. So the command level have the most work to do in our training programs. They need to be thinking about recruitment and hiring, the leadership message, the culture of the agency. Training is just one bullet. Operational directives, measurement, outreach to diverse communities. So it's the line level training is one package for chiefs, and of course, training in implicit bias and training in bias is only one package in the larger picture of police reforms that we need.
Yeah, and Lorie, one of the reasons that I referred to the article that I did at the top of the show was I was Googling your name and your name came up in that article. One of the sections, one of those 8 sections you were referred to in that basis. So I think your point is very clear that you have a piece of the pie, but not the whole pie. And there's a lot, and there's many more things that we need to address. And I'm glad that you mentioned both in police work and outside police work. And I'm really hoping that if we push back against the institution of policing, which I think is a healthy thing to do, that we'll push back against some of the other institutions that, quite frankly, that have been protected and are not serving the families that from the Black community and some of the other, economically impacted communities across the board. And that's.
And I share one thing Jim said is, we're not just having a discussion about bias and racism in policing, and that's a good thing. We're having a discussion about societal racism and bias. I mean, that's where we pull our police from. There's no getting around it. So we need to be looking at the bigger picture, systemic racism in many institutions and not just police. Yeah,
and that's the role that I play as an elected official, really looking at those multiple areas and trying to do the best I can to hear people in a way that we can respond that's healthy and productive. And that's why one of the reasons that Jim's here tonight and yourself. So thank you for being here. But on the policing area, let's go to the police chiefs to kind of, weigh in as Jim and Lorie just did in terms of the current, the perspective that you have in our current affairs, right? The current affairs, both in Minneapolis and also in Georgia. And also as it relates to Rhode Island. So Brian, why don't you start, and then we'll go to Sid after that.
Sure. Thanks, Lieutenant Governor. I like every other police chief in this state was horrified by the actions that we witnessed both in Minneapolis and Atlanta. Some really outrageous acts that took place. We here in Rhode Island have been meeting with the chiefs. We're trying to come together and put together a plan to address these issues because we understand that this is a problem that we have to address. We know that we have to understand. First of all, before we can understand it, we need to know our history, what's going on with this, how this happened, how we got here. And we need to look at those things so that we can understand the perspective of the people that we work for. To be honest with you, that's who we work for. We work for the citizens, every single citizen, and we should be treating them with humanity, even those that we are interacting with who are placed in custody, right? We have an obligation to take care of them as well. So we continue as an association to support and explore ways that we can better meet with the community, to better have better relationships with the community, and go forward in those areas.
So, do you want to just weigh in on the current events that from your perspective as a former chief of police? Once you're a chief, you're always a chief in my book. So. And also now as the position you have as an executive director of an association of chiefs of police. I mean, you're right in the middle of this as well as you were on the gun issues, and now front and center on this one. So give us your perspective, and then I want to make a comment and then open it up to a discussion. I think Tony might be joining us. I'm not sure, but go ahead, Sid.
Good. Well, thank you. I think Dr. Fridell really hit the nail on the head, and it was referenced by Jim as well, that it's the messaging of leadership that is going to allow us to have conversations with the citizens we serve. But words are words, actions are actions, and that's what's needed. I think we do a lot of things well here in Rhode Island. The best thing that I can say is Jim and Lorie I didn't just meet them today. We've had conversations, right? So that's the good part first. We need more to do. There's plenty to do. Jim spoke about an incident that happened in Providence. Those are the types of things that the public is looking to see if law enforcement is hearing what they're saying. And I think we are. One of the things that we're putting together is, as Brian had said, was sort of a future look, not just on the things that we need to do better at, but also to speak about things that we already have in place. That chokehold that was used, we banned that in Rhode Island, I think about 7 to 8 years ago. Our de-escalation. That doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean that it's followed by every person, but on the teaching level and what we're trying to present, we're doing pretty good at that in Rhode Island, at least on that front line. But I certainly think that the leadership side, and that's sort of my role in this now, is to help with putting the right people together to sit at the table with each other. And personally, when I was a chief, as Brian is, you're wrapped in your community, not necessarily with everything that's going on across the state. And that's where I get to sort of take a step back. I don't have a council or I don't have to deal with a union president. I don't have any of those things to deal with, but rather trying to make sure that we are being responsive and responsible to the folks that we serve to. So, that's my perspective. It's a little bit different in the sense of I don't have any authority anymore, right? I have a voice, but I think most importantly, my voice is to help get the right people together and to hear, to listen, and but most of all, make sure we're taking action.
Yeah. So Sid, that I'm just going to lay out a couple of my personal experiences and have that lead into a broader conversation, not only on police work, but as both Jim and Lorie said, this is a community issue as well. So, I mean, I coached in more games in the Nunaconnecticut Center in Providence than most people would, in a lifetime of a family that would do, so, and I had a very diverse group of kids in the true sense of the word that I traveled with for almost 10 years. And some of the things I saw when I was on the road was just unbelievable. You talk about biased or really intentional or unintentional. It was there. Whether I was, down in North Carolina at the Chapel Hill playing at UNC and having it was very clear that with some kids on the team were treated differently than other kids on the team in a social setting. It was very disturbing, and it was something that those young kids are still in my life today. And Jim has been fighting on issues that impacted them every day of their lives. Headed to ACI, in a senior year on an offense that it didn't even register. Yet they lost a whole senior year. One of the students. So, and then what I see is, and we started a school that was designed to address these gaps that are happening, and we probably have one of the most successful public school entities in the country that is addressing this right now, and we've closed learning gaps in a quicker way than anybody has in the state, and now these young kids are graduated from high school and they're headed to college, and all different shapes, sizes, and colors. So, that was a direct result of when I was basketball coaching and saw this unbelievable inequity and disparity in the way not only that kids were treated, but also what the anticipation was. I mean, there was referees that would say that certain kids on my team were going to go to jail and others weren't. And guess what? The kids that were going to go to jail didn't look like me. They looked like Jim. And this was very disturbing. And even when we opened up our school in one of the communities, which is, we have, certainly certain communities are more white than others. And I grew up one that is more, more white than of color. And yet now we have this diverse group of kids attending school in our community. And we have people say, we don't want those kids in our schools. I mean, it's right here in Rhode Island. This is actually happening. Kids being profiled that might be walking to the local diner from an area that's predominantly white, and calls are being made even though they got backpacks and they got books in their arms, and calls are being made to the local police, taking the position that these kids are up to no good. So, there's many levels of this. I think our policing has done a good job in terms of the fact that we haven't rose to the occasion that we saw in other parts of the country. But the point that was made by Jim and Lorie, and also both chiefs, we got a lot to do here. And so I'll just that's my personal perspective on this. And this is the skin in the game I have. I'm not colorblind. I can tell that Jim is a different color than I am. And I'm happy to admit that. And so this whole notion of colorblindness, that's another way to just that's another way to just say, hey, I got some friends that are different, that look different than me. This is real. It's happening here in Rhode Island. And tell us how we're gonna, let's open up to the conversation. I don't know if Tony Silva's around. Bring him in, Ben, because I want him to join the last few minutes of the call. But that's
Tony's been in and out.
Okay.
He's not here at the moment.
We'll get him on the next show, just like we will do with Colonel Clements.
Everybody's muted right now, but feel free to unmute yourself whenever you want to talk if you didn't see the chat on the side.
Yeah, so I want to open up that conversation because it's for Rhode Island. It is that we're being the demonstrations. Oh shit! What's happening? Oh my God.
You're still here. You're all set.
I am okay. I'm just off the video because I didn't touch my computer enough. But anyways, let's open up the conversation to as I'm trying to get my video back. But please respond to what I just said in terms of, like, not only is it police work, but it's also deeper than that. And what are we going to do it? And what role does the the police have in that effort?
So I'll start with, I think the role that the police have is we need to be out front with it. We have to recognize that we have not only problems in society, but also there are issues in police agencies, and we need to start to address those issues. One of the issues that we need to look at is training. I mentioned that I attended Lorie's training on bias-based policing. But that was a few years ago. She hasn't been back. So we need to look at how we can do that. How can we do that in a way that is also fair to the residents that we work for, or that pay our salaries and things like that? Because if you look at it budgetarily wise, that there are times when you're looking at, are you going to be able to buy a cruiser rather, and things like that. So we need to look at, we need to make this more professional. We need to make it look like attorneys. My wife's an attorney, and she has to have CLEs every year. And, we need to look at exploring that here in Rhode Island, making sure that we have certain areas, ethics, bias-based training, other areas that are important, community involvement and things like that, so that we can move forward in this area.
And may I comment on that, Lieutenant Governor?
Yeah, please carry the show here while I'm trying to get back on.
Good. Okay. So first of all, the chief is absolutely right. Key skills, key areas, police
I would,
always have.
I echo what the chief said there, but I also think, for the public, so Jim mentioned about the officer that couldn't be fired. I do want to clarify. I mean, that officer would have to go through a process, and there'd be due process, but that officer could be fired. It just wouldn't be instant as it happened that we saw. But on that same note, what we do and what we, as some would say, policing their own, doesn't put things in the public light. I think that's something that we should look at in making a change there and how that policing is done. We saw that the Attorney General put out a policy change where all of those calls where there's either a use of force, deadly force, or an accusation of excessive force now has to bring in the Attorney General's office, and there's a review there. So I think those are things that we in law enforcement have to be able to accept, that there is, the public has the right to know, and we get the right people to be a part of that so that we can show what we are doing. And if it's done behind a closed door, it just takes on that perception that, everything's not on the table and everything's not being dealt with. And I think that goes a long ways in a police chief way back when I got hired told me that you should never take a contact personal. And I think what happens in policing many times is, if you put your shoes with somebody who begins to resist arrest, the mentality with law enforcement is that at all ends, you're going to end up in cuffs one way or another, or worst scenario is somebody ends up dead with deadly force. But I think, we train on de-escalation, we train on biases, but the implementation to actually turn around and get that officer to do a self-assessment of what's happening, is it all worth taking the next level of force? Is it really necessary to do that? And I'll tell, having been there and as a police officer, that's a tough thing to do. And I'm not saying that to make an excuse for anybody. I'm actually saying it because we need to recognize that. And we need to figure out a way to be able to do that.
Yeah, I want to get Lorie in a second, but I just want to respond, and I'll go to Jim. But Sid, I was a mayor for 12 years. On far left, on offenses that dismissal should have happened, the Bill of Rights and the process did not do what it needed to do. So, I get what you're saying there, that it can happen, but clearly there was a few officers that we brought to a Bill of Rights in a way through arbitration that we had to do, and we lost. And the officer's behavior was so bad that he actually kept his behavior up because he got away with it, and then we were able to catch him in a way that we actually got it done. So I mean, there's got to be some adjustment there. Jim, jump in, and then I'll go to Lorie.
And you know what? I stand corrected. You can't fire an officer. I've been a part of tribunals where, with the three people, where the person was fired, and then it took a while to get before the Superior Court on appeal. The problem is you can't wait 6 months to a year to fire somebody. You can't fire anybody within 6 months. That you can't. Take 6 months on average, maybe 8 months to get it to the Bill of Rights Tribunal. And then if you can even get a conviction there, which means to back the department chief to fire the person, that person has a right to appeal to Superior Court. So you got more months there, so it could take a year or more to terminate somebody. That's got to stop. That cannot work. I oppose that. I'm going to fight that. We can't take a year to fire somebody that may have committed felony murder. A year. That can't hold. Also, there are some people that, no matter how much training, they're not built to be a police officer. They shouldn't be on the force. They shouldn't have went through the academy. No amount of training is going to help them. they're going to make a poor decision. We saw it in Atlanta. That person was trained, and he made about 5 mistakes all in one supposed arrest. 5 mistakes. If he's convicted, he could face the death penalty. So obviously, training did not work in his case.
Yeah. So let me go to Lorie, and then I'll go to the chiefs to respond after Lorie gets in her comments. Thank you, Lorie.
Good. It goes back to what Chief Sullivan was saying, because for any major police topic, agencies reinforce the training. They don't just do it one-off. And so we do have a booster training where we reinforce the same principles with new and different types of vignettes. But the other thing that we're doing more and more is training the community. This came up, I think it was one of the comments you made, Lieutenant Governor, or maybe it was Jim, but it's when the community members call the police based on their own biases. And we call that profiling by proxy, where somebody might call maybe truly because their biases put them in fear. But the police need to be aware that that can be happening and have their antenna up and deal with it appropriately. The incident in Central Park was even worse than profiling by proxy. She was actually kind of using the system. She was not fearful of the black man, but she said, I know if I call and say that I'm fearful, I'm going to get the police here. So we need to be training the community as well as the police, so they're not putting the police in that difficult position.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. Chiefs, do you want to jump in? Jim kind of challenged you a little bit there, but in a good way. But I think that it's, certainly you get to respond in a way that the people who are watching this understand the where the police chiefs are right now, where their mindset is on those issues.
So I agree with Jim that that no amount of training would help that officer in Minneapolis and Atlanta. It starts with background checks, good background checks, in-depth background checks, interviews. And then it continues with in-depth training, scenario-based training, right? You put people in, training people how to make decisions. We don't do that right now. We don't get involved in how do you make decisions, taking all the information that you have. We don't do that. We don't have our people make them better decision makers. We need to explore part of that. That needs to be one of the things, the avenues we look at. The other most important part is supervision. I look at those videos, and both of those videos, unless I'm wrong, I do not see a supervisor show up at either one of those incidents. That's concerning to me. And the supervisors are there. Supervisors there to make sure that the officer is doing the correct thing, the right way, following policy. That's what a supervisor is supposed to be doing. And those are important things that we need to address and make sure we focus on.
Yeah, Sid, you want to talk to Jim's point about how long it takes if somebody really is violating and not a good police officer? Well, how do you deal with them in terms of the time frame that they actually are protected, and how do you move this in a way that's more, it's fair, but it's also quicker?
Right. So I certainly was not making the point about not being able to fire him and saying that there was a process. All I was doing was merely pointing out that, they could be fired. I don't agree with the process. I don't agree on how long it does take. But let's also remember that that's state law. So just for anybody in the public that doesn't understand that, we can't take a vote to change a policy within the police chiefs on how we handle discipline, because that's state law for us right now. And there is a process that's going to be brought out. There's a commission in the Senate that's looking at it, and I believe there's probably going to be some legislation in the House very soon. So, that discussion has to happen. And I don't know any police chief that wants an individual that has shown biases towards anybody on their force. But you're right, the process in and of itself that's in place certainly protects those officers who that have more than one incident, let's say, right? So we can all make an assessment on somebody when they do something once. You do it twice, 3 times, you know, there needs to be a process that can be handled at whatever the discipline level is appropriate. And, you know, I don't think we can, I think it's easy with the capital murder charge. There's not a question on what happens to that officer. And the police officer's Bill of Rights, and I'm not defending it again, but, you know, that's put in place because right now we have 39 police chiefs that make an assessment on what's the appropriate discipline level. So that may be a part of it too. Maybe we need to look at someone who is a little more independent on how that assessment of discipline is handed out and at what level to be done there. So yeah, 2 days suspension. That's as much as a police chief can do if the individual wants to contest it. That is another piece that we need to make sure that it's out there and understood. A police chief could hand somebody a substantial suspension. If that officer does not contest that, then that suspension would stand. But a chief is, you know, held that by state law right now, if it's more than 2 days and that officer wants, they can have a hearing on that. So, you know, that's certainly from the police chiefs. We haven't come out with an agenda on what we think needs to be changed or addressed. We are going to be doing that soon. You know, I think it's inappropriate and we have to look at that. And that, you know, that's under the umbrella of our major topic of what we're talking here. And that's one way of dealing with officers. Being able to look at officers that are on the job after a year, because we get a lot of training in the academy. But after a few years, we really need to look at that training that's in there as well. And we're not like some states that have absolute requirements. Chief Sullivan spoke to this, you know, the CLEs. We don't have that specific thing in some areas where I think it's, you know, it should be. We have it on domestic violence. We have it on use of a weapon. But we don't have it in state law that says an officer has to get, you know, use any number, but 20 hours every year or every 2 years on a specific topic such as this. So I think those are the things that that may be a shock to some, but those are things that, as the police chiefs, we're okay talking about that and bringing that to the table as best practices of things we need to change. Along with that, Lieutenant Governor, everybody here, that's money and that's funding, and that's a, you know, that's a major issue right now. Is some people thinking that there should be defunding of police. I think there's areas of policing where defunding may be appropriate, where we're able to bring in counselors and you know, every call shouldn't just go to the police department and handling more appropriate places. I think we need to do better at showing what services are available for families out there where they're not just relying on the police to do that. And we're asking police officers to do things 30 years ago that they didn't even have, you know, they would never take on. Again, I'm not making excuses. I'm pointing out things that I've seen over my career, and I think things that, you know, we need to address on.
Yeah, Lorie, you want to, you know, because I know that some of this work that that the chief was just talking about costs money. What does it cost to kind of create the, you know, what does a budget need to look like to do the work that you see need to be done, and some of the things that Sid just talked about?
Well, good. Well, on the topic of defunding the police, one part of the conversation that excites me is public funding for some of the areas that actually produce crime. If we had better education, if kids had a roof over their head and food in their stomach at the start of the day, if there were opportunities in their communities to actually get gainful employment, then we would have less crime. And then we could actually probably reduce policing because their work would be down. I'm a little bit more concerned about defunding the police absent those preliminary measures, because I am very concerned about the unintended consequences on the marginalized communities that actually need police service the most. So yes, let's fund those areas where we can provide opportunity and reduce crime so that the police have less work. But if we do one before we do the other, I think we're going to have some unintended consequences.
Jim, weigh in here
Yes.
a little bit. Weigh in a little bit here, because
Well,
you've worked on, you know, let's speak to the state legislation that Sid just talked about. You were, I mean, you
Well,
coached
I was just named to the commission by the Senate Senator Harold Metz. So we haven't met yet, and I look forward to participating in that commission by the Senate to take a look at the Bill of Rights. So I have nothing to report yet, but I've been learning, by the day what's going on here. I've actually participated in Bill of Rights hearings, at least two, and that person was fired, but it took so long that it just made me feel that the system just didn't work. So I work with the chiefs. I think that there's nothing wrong with looking at a new model of public safety. We've done it in the past. 10 years ago, a new radical idea came across. It was called community policing. All right. So now in Providence, you've had a dramatic drop in crime despite the fact you have dramatic officers. All right. So you have had less crime, you have less police. Nowhere, I don't think there's any evidence that says that if you have more police, you have less crime. I don't know of any study that says that. So let's look at it from a holistic model point of view, where we look at the mental health professionals, the social service professionals, and some of those dollars invariably must come out of the police budget. So we got to look at that too. We have to take a look at the entire city budget in terms of where the dollars should go to enhance public safety, not to enhance the police departments, but to enhance public safety. So there might be some redirection of dollars for sure that needs to happen to assist in public safety. So, I know 90% of the calls that most departments get are of a nonviolent nature, 90%. So, certainly there's some wiggle room there to shift some funding to areas that would have more impact in terms of public safety.
Yeah, so and again, I know some of the training, some of the things, require some level of overtime. But in terms of a percentage of a budget, what are you talking about?
Well, I don't know. Every department's different.
Yeah.
Every department's different. I do believe we have to have people protected. Okay,
Yeah.
So protect and serve is the oath. Nobody wants nobody to be out there. We have vulnerable communities, so we need to have people that are really interested in occupying and harassing. We got to figure out a way through the Bill of Rights to be able to get rid of them quickly, because they hurt the department, they hurt the community, they hurt the state, they hurt everybody. So that has to be done quickly, not a year, okay? Because that way you're not going to have trust in the community. So the people that are there to protect and serve, we need that. We need people to protect and serve our community. Do we need as many officers as we have now? Probably not. Do we need a new model similar to community policing that would take into account, the social services and services to the homeless and mental health? Yes, let's look at the holistic model, how that would look, and so at the end of it, it's about enhancing public safety. So it really doesn't matter, if we're down police, in Providence over 10 years, and what happened? Down police, less crime. Now, of course, the missing piece is community policing. That's a model. We need to come up with an enhanced model that enhances public safety and not worry about budgets and officers and numbers. That will take care of itself. We'll keep our eye on the prize, which is to improve public safety.
Yeah, and I think it's doable, Jim. I ran a budget for 12 years as a mayor. If you're talking about, a couple percentage points on a police budget to get you into a strategy, I think that's very doable. But we'll find out. And the police, because they're front and center right now, chiefs, you got a very important role right now, and I know you recognize that. But so the other issues that need to get addressed are going to follow what Jim just said. How quick we're going to be in terms of putting things in place, and that's going to roll over into other areas that Lorie and Jim have talked about, and you have as well. But first things first, and right now that's the most important thing. So what do you think on the timing that Jim just said in terms of both on the state level and on the local level, trying to not give an analysis paralysis to this thing, but you're actually getting, you're actually doing something now. What's the thoughts on that? And then I want to go to Lorie with some of her finishing comments because we're coming up on the hour. It goes pretty quick.
Yeah.
Brian, you're off mute now.
Okay, sorry about that.
How quick can we be? How nimble are we?
Well, as I read, the situation that we're in developed over 150 years, and we need to make sure that what we're doing is not just a Band-Aid approach, right? It's I think right now we cannot say, bring out our stats and say we did this, we do that. We have to show, and we have to reach out to the community and have a heart-to-heart talk with the community. And it's going to be painful for the police. We need to learn some hard lessons, and I think those things are going to take, time to develop, and we need to sit there and listen and not say too much. We need to listen and hear what the community is telling us. That's the most important thing that I see. I can't give you a timeline for that, but we need to do it and start doing it yesterday, to be honest.
Well, the quicker we get our feet on the ground in those communities, the better. And we're going to need the help of Jim, and we're going to need the help of the young kids that I brought on, Dimitri and others, to actually get us into the communities as quickly as we can. I think that's a good point, Brian. Let's see whether we can activate that. I know that our office is going to do everything we can to, from the level that I'm at, to make that happen. Lorie, do you have a couple of finishing comments, and then I want to go to Jim for the last word?
Good. Yeah, well, I'm actually hopeful, and I wasn't sure I was maybe 2 weeks ago, but I am. But there's a lot of frustration now because I think people were looking for big fixes. But Chief Sullivan just said, we didn't get here yesterday. Things weren't going to be fixed just because we took a look at it after Ferguson. We're on the long haul. It's generational change, and it's more than just policing. It's society as a whole.
Jim, how are we going to be quick and nimble? But, as Coach Wooden said, we want to be quick, but not in a hurry. We want to be quick, but not in a hurry. That's Coach John Wooden. I think that's good advice. Quick, but not in a hurry.
I like the idea of, communicating. Okay. I know that I've been in communication with most of the chiefs in the state over the last 10 years. So we need to continue that with earnest, okay, and bring in a larger group of people in our communities. And I agree, we need to listen, just listen to what people are saying and not try to be defensive or fight back or whatever, because then things will not change. The only way things are going to change is if we listen and accept it and then build on that acceptance. Because to defend the past, that's not going to work, because you can't defend it, because it's not worked, not to the degree that we would like it to work. A lot of this is about society. We've got to change the hearts and minds of regular people from which our police come from. To many, George Floyd was the first time they thought of America being a racist society. I mean, that's the first time. I mean, so we got a ways to go. I mean, if it took that to see injustice and racism, it took that, then we really do have a long way to go. But unfortunately, I think it's going to be a hard way to go, because too many people are in denial in terms of what's right in front of them, right before their eyes. They just don't want to see it. I think it's ugly.
You're making a vital point, because we've been out and about for a lot of years, but recently, and I've been saying, just answer this question with a simple yes or no. No equivocation, no additional sentences to it. Yes or no? Do Black Lives Matter? Yes or no? I don't want to hear all lives matter. That's not the question. Of course, all lives matter. I don't want to hear, but those people who are protesting, that are burning the city down, they should be penalized. Of course they should. But that's not the question. And I find it very concerning, Jim, that certain people, and mostly people that look like me, have trouble just saying, yes, Black Lives Matter, period.
You're right. It's painful for people. They just can't say Black Lives Matter, period. It is painful for them to do it. It's difficult, and they'd rather talk about property damage than the loss of life, as long as the loss of life is Black. They place property damage higher than the loss of life. They might not do it intentionally, but if you listen to them, it's clear that property is more important than life, which to me is insanity.
Insanity.
And so we got people out here that prioritize property. They talk about rioting, but they won't talk about capital murder.
Well,
they can't. They don't want to accept that.
I'm not trained in that area, but I can tell you right now,
it's unbelievable.
In my opinion, it's because they can't say it because they don't believe it.
Right.
Right.
And I agree with you. They don't believe
it because they don't believe it, and they can't. They have to equivocate. They have to put a an in, if, but on the end of that sentence. And quite frankly, until you get the majority of the people who can say that and really believe it, it is going to be tough to move it. And that's why the police work is so important right now, because you're leading the charge. The police departments are leading the charge in this. They can lead the charge to a different place. And if we don't get them to move to a different place, then it's going to be very difficult for us to get what Lorie and Jim talked about in terms of getting the community to get into a different place in terms of their bias, right?
I agree.
Thank you. Hey, I want to just, looks like you want to chime in. Do you want to say one last word? Because we can go another minute if you want.
No, I got to go.
You got to go. Okay. Thank you all for being here. We're going to keep it going, and we'll be in touch with each and every one of you. God bless you. Thank you so much for weighing in. Very important. Each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor, thank you all.
Yes.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Doc.
Yeah, so there you have it. That's a good panel and really good, good conversation. So we're going to continue this in a way. And if you want to weigh in on that, if you have some thoughts about how to get to where both, Jim and the chiefs were talking about and Lorie were talking about, call our office, 222-2371. We want you engaged in the conversation. This is not going to be the last show. We've had multiple shows before this on this issue. We're going to continue, because in order for us to get this right, we're going to need everybody to be involved. And if we don't get it right, then the state of Rhode Island is not going to achieve what it's capable of achieving. So thank you all for listening in. And I'm Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee, and your voice matters. And thank you for joining in. We'll see you next week.